tracing the evolution of validity in testing.
Right.
And it's way more complex than just, does this test work? Imagine we're building a house.
Okay.
We wouldn't just check if the hammer and saw work.
Right.
That's reliability. We need to know if the blueprint itself is sound.
Okay. Yeah.
If the design holds up.
Yeah.
That's where validity comes in. And today's deep dive takes us into how this very concept has evolved in the field of testing.
It's a fascinating journey.
Yeah.
We're exploring a lecture
Okay.
from the APA Division 5 YouTube channel,
Okay.
which traces this history beautifully.
Awesome.
You'll see how the focus shifted from a strict emphasis on observable outcomes
Right.
to a much deeper understanding of what truly makes a test valid.
It's like we discovered a whole hidden world beneath the surface.
It is.
So buckle up as we unpack how the idea of validity has transformed over the decades.
Let's rewind to the 1950s,
Okay.
where empiricism was king.
Okay.
Think, show me the proof. The emphasis was all about concrete, measurable results, and there was a real skepticism towards anything abstract or theoretical.
I'll believe it when I see it kind of approach, right?
Exactly.
Makes sense in some ways.
Yeah.
But how do you measure something like ego strength with a ruler? Things get complicated quickly.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Curtin, a prominent researcher of that era, summed it up well. So long as we stick to operational definitions, we will be on safe ground. And basically, if you can't define it in a way that's directly observable and measurable, forget about measuring it validly. This limited what could even be considered for validation.
So only tests measuring easily quantifiable things could really be considered valid.
1955.
A revolution hits the scene.
Enter Cronbach and Meehl,
Okay.
shaking things up with their groundbreaking paper on construct validity.
Wow.
They argued that to capture truly meaningful aspects of human experience, we have to go beyond what's directly observable.
Here's where things get really interesting.
Yes.
They introduce the idea of constructs, things like intelligence, anxiety, creativity. These are core aspects of being human.
Absolutely.
But we can't just see them.
Right.
We infer them from behavior.
Exactly.
And their claim was bold.
It was.
For a measure of, for example, ego strength, there is no adequately pertinent criterion to predict. This blew the doors wide open, challenging the very foundation of how we thought about validity.
Talk about a paradigm shift.
But if you can't directly observe these constructs, how do you even begin to measure them validly?
Well, they attempted to ground these constructs in scientific theory, linking them to observable data points that could be rigorously tested. Cronbach later admitted this was a bit pretentious, especially for the young field of psychology, but it was necessary at the time.
So they were trying to give constructs a solid scientific footing, even if it meant stretching the existing framework a bit.
Precisely. It was about fitting these abstract ideas into a world obsessed with what could be seen and measured. And while maybe a tad overreaching, it set the stage for something crucial.
Okay, what's that?
The idea that we could evaluate how well a test measures an underlying construct, even if we can't directly observe it.
That's a game changer.
It is.
So now we're not just talking about whether a test measures what it says it measures, but also how well it taps into these underlying invisible constructs.
Yes. And this is where we start to see a distinction forming between different types of validity. Before Cronbach and Meehl, the focus was primarily on what we now call criterion-related validity. Does the test predict some external outcome? But now, with construct validity, we're adding another layer, asking how well the test reflects the theoretical construct it's supposed to be measuring.
I'm starting to see how these different types of validity emerge. But did everyone agree on what construct validity actually meant?
If only it were that simple. Instead of a unified understanding, two distinct paths emerged, creating a bit of an identity crisis for construct validity.
A validity identity crisis.
On one hand, some saw it as a specific type of validity alongside content validity and criterion validity. On the other hand, some argued that construct validity should be the overarching framework for all types of validity.
Hold on. So some saw it as one piece of the puzzle and others saw it as the whole puzzle itself.
Exactly.
Wow.
And this tension is reflected in the research and discussions of the time. For instance, Lovinger argued that from a scientific perspective, Construct validity was all that mattered.
Yeah.
However, the 1966 standards for educational and psychological measurement still treated content criterion and construct validity as separate entities.
Even with this push for a unified view, those separate categories persisted.
Yeah.
What was Cronbach's stance on all this?
Right.
He seemed to be a central figure in this whole evolution.
Cronbach, the thoughtful voice,
Yeah.
wrestled with both perspectives.
Okay.
In 1971, he acknowledged the need for a more integrated approach, recognizing that validation of an instrument calls for an integration of many types of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
But he continued to treat construct validity as a specific type,
Okay.
particularly useful for those theoretical variables that couldn't be assessed through content or criteria alone.
So he saw the value in both approaches.
Yeah.
Recognizing the need to consider multiple types of evidence,
Yeah.
but also acknowledging the unique role of construct validity in measuring those hard-to-pin-down constructs.
You've got it.
Okay.
But this lack of a unified view had practical consequences without clear guidelines.
Yeah.
The field was vulnerable to what we might call cherry picking.
Cherry picking.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Without a clear consensus on what constituted validity, people could simply focus on the easiest type to demonstrate, potentially ignoring other crucial aspects.
Ah, I see.
Yeah.
So someone could claim their test was valid just because it covered the right content or predicted some outcome without really addressing whether it was actually measuring the underlying construct it claimed to measure.
And that's where the push for a more unified and comprehensive understanding of validity continued to gain traction.
We're about to meet Samuel Messick,
Okay.
who really shook things up.
Messick's 1975 article was a game changer.
Okay.
He argued that validity wasn't just about a test's technical function, but about how it's used and the consequences of those uses.
So it's not just if a test measures what it says it measures,
Right.
but also what that measurement actually means and how it affects people's lives.
Exactly.
Feels like he's bringing ethics into the equation.
You could say that he brought in those crucial elements of meaning and values, arguing they're intertwined with any interpretation of test scores. And he stressed that the consequences of testing go beyond the individual, potentially impacting entire groups and even society as a whole.
That's a huge shift.
It is.
We're not just looking at whether a test predicts some outcome, but also the broader impact of using it.
Right.
Did this change how we think about the different types of validity?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Messick argued that those traditional categories weren't enough.
Oh, wow.
He pushed for a unified view where validity wasn't about checking boxes, but about making a strong argument for the appropriateness and meaningfulness of the inferences we draw from test scores.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Right.
It sounds like he's moving us away from a checklist approach to something more nuanced.
Yes.
How did he define this unified concept of validity?
In his 1989 work, Messick defined validity as an integrated evaluative judgment of the degree to which empirical evidence and theoretical rationales support the adequacy and appropriateness of inferences and actions based on test scores.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
It is.
Can we break that down a bit?
Sure.
He's saying that validity is an overall judgment based on evidence.
This evidence comes from different sources.
Okay.
The test itself, the theory behind what it measures and how the scores are used.
Okay.
Essentially, we need to build a strong case that justifies the inferences we're making and the actions we're taking based on the test.
It's like we're building a legal case for the test.
Kind of.
Arguing for its legitimacy and the soundness of its interpretation.
Exactly.
So did this unified view completely replace those traditional categories of content criterion and construct validity?
Not entirely.
Okay.
While Messick pushed for a unified concept, he didn't discard those categories altogether. Instead, he argued they should be seen as different sources of evidence that contribute to the overall validity argument.
Okay, so they're not separate types of validity,
Right.
but rather different facets of a single overarching concept.
Exactly. Let's imagine we're developing a test to measure creativity.
All right, cool.
Content validity would focus on whether the test items actually represent the skills and knowledge associated with creativity.
Yeah.
Do they require divergent thinking?
Right.
Do they tap into different forms of creative expression?
So we're checking if the content of the test
Yeah.
actually reflects what we mean by creativity.
Exactly.
What about criterion-related validity?
Okay.
How would that fit in?
In this case, we might look at whether scores on our creativity test predict performance on some external criterion, like success in an art class, or the number of patents someone holds.
Interesting.
Do people who score high on our test actually tend to be more creative in real-world settings?
So we're seeing if the test scores have predictive power,
Right.
if they actually relate to something meaningful outside the test itself.
Yes.
And then, of course, we have construct validity.
Right.
How would we approach that for our creativity test?
Construct validity would involve a deeper dive into the theory and research on creativity.
Okay.
We'd need to demonstrate that our test is measuring the underlying construct of creativity, not just some other related factor.
So we're going beyond just the surface level to make sure our test truly reflects the complex nature of the construct we're trying to measure.
Exactly.
It feels like construct validity is the most challenging aspect to demonstrate.
It often is.
Especially with something as multifaceted as creativity.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why Messick's unified view is so important.
Okay.
It recognizes that validity is not a simple check mark.
Right.
It's an ongoing process of gathering evidence, making arguments, and refining our understanding.
Okay, I'm getting it.
Good.
It's not about finding the perfect evidence or proving our case beyond a shadow of a doubt. It's about building the strongest possible argument, considering all relevant evidence, and acknowledging the inherent complexities and limitations.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's what we call the argument-based approach to validity.
Okay.
Instead of relying on a checklist of separate validity types, we construct a comprehensive argument that supports the interpretations and uses of test scores.
This argument-based approach seems like a more realistic and rigorous way
It is.
of thinking about validity, recognizing that it's an ongoing process of inquiry and critical evaluation.
It is.
And while it might sound intimidating, it's actually quite practical.
It is.
As we look to the future of validity, those thornier issues, social consequences, fairness, and even how technology impacts things become increasingly important.
Yeah.
All right, let's put on our future thinking caps.
Okay.
What are some of the big trends or debates shaping the field?
Well, one trend is the move away from just looking at test scores to considering the whole person. A single number can't capture the complexity of a person's abilities or potential.
Yeah.
And we're finally acknowledging that.
It's like we're breaking free from that reduce humans to data points mentality.
Exactly.
What's the alternative?
The idea of multifaceted assessment is gaining momentum.
Okay, what is that?
It's about using various methods, both quantitative and qualitative, to get a more complete and well-rounded picture of someone.
So instead of just a standardized test, we might also consider portfolios of work or even interviews.
Absolutely.
It seems much more holistic.
It is.
Different assessment methods reveal different aspects. By using multiple measures, we can build a more nuanced and accurate understanding.
This makes so much sense. And this shift towards multifaceted assessment has significant implications for validity.
How so?
We can't just evaluate each measure in isolation.
Well,
we need to consider how they all work together to support the interpretations or decisions we're making.
The validity argument becomes even more complex.
It does.
Weaving together evidence from various sources to create a more comprehensive picture.
Right.
It's like a tapestry instead of a single thread.
That's a great way to put it. It also raises questions about how to weigh different types of evidence.
Okay, like what?
How much weight should be given to standardized test scores versus other measures?
Right.
These are the kinds of questions validity researchers are actively exploring.
It seems like the future of validity is all about embracing complexity.
It is.
In how we assess individuals and the methods we use to do so.
And technology is adding another layer of complexity.
Oh, boy.
We're already seeing the rise of artificial intelligence and machine learning in assessment, which brings both exciting possibilities and new challenges.
AI in testing.
Yeah.
That's both fascinating and a bit unsettling.
It is.
What are some ways AI is being used right now?
One area is automated scoring of essays and open-ended responses.
Wow.
AI algorithms can analyze text and assign scores based on criteria like grammar, vocabulary, and coherence.
So robots are grading our papers now.
Kind of.
That raises so many questions.
It does.
Are they tougher graders than humans? Are they susceptible to the same biases?
Those are precisely the kinds of questions we need to be asking.
Right.
We need to ensure these AI scoring systems are fair, accurate, and don't introduce new biases into the assessment process.
Bias in AI is a huge concern across the board.
It is.
It's the garbage in, garbage out principle.
Right.
If the data used to train the algorithms is biased,
Yeah.
the results will be biased too.
Absolutely.
Involving diverse perspectives in the development and evaluation of these technologies is crucial.
Very important.
We need to ensure that AI is used to enhance fairness and equity.
Yes.
Not exacerbate existing inequality.
It's not just about the technology itself,
Right.
but how it's designed, used, and monitored.
Are there other potential benefits or risks
There are.
we should be aware of when using AI in assessment?
One potential benefit is personalized assessment experiences,
Okay.
tailoring content and difficulty levels to individual test takers.
Okay.
Imagine a system that adjusts the questions based on your previous responses,
Oh, yeah.
creating a more engaging and meaningful experience.
That sounds incredible.
It does.
They can make testing more relevant and responsive
Yeah.
to individual needs.
But are there downsides?
Well, yeah, I was just thinking that.
One concern is that AI could lead to even more high-stakes testing environments,
Okay.
amplifying pressure on test takers.
Like a dystopian future where we're constantly ranked and rated by algorithms.
We must ensure these technologies are used responsibly and prioritize human well-being and growth.
So the future of validity is intertwined with broader questions.
It is.
It's about technology, ethics, data, and the pursuit of fairness and equity.
Absolutely.
It's a lot to consider.
It is, but that's what makes this field so compelling.
Yeah.
It's not just about technical details. It's about grappling with fundamental questions, about how we measure human capabilities in a meaningful and just way.
You've given us a lot to think about.
My pleasure.
As we wrap up this deep dive into validity, what's the one message you want our listeners to take away?
Remember that validity isn't a destination.
Okay.
It's a journey.
I like that.
It's an ongoing process of critical thinking, questioning assumptions, and striving for greater understanding.
It's not about finding the perfect test or the right answer.
Right.
It's about engaging in a continuous conversation about what matters most and how we can best measure and support those values.
And that's a conversation we all need to be part of.
It is.
Whether you're a test developer, a test user, or someone who's taken a test, you have a role in shaping the future of validity.
That's a powerful thought.
It is.
We all have a stake in ensuring tests are used fairly, ethically,
Absolutely.
and in a way that benefits individuals and society.
So the next time you encounter a test, don't just accept it at face value. Ask critical questions about its purpose, assumptions, and potential impact. Be an informed and engaged citizen of the testing world.
That's a fantastic call to action.
Thank you.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of validity.
Sounds good.
We've explored the historical roots of the concept, the evolution of validity frameworks, the nuances of the argument-based approach, and the ongoing challenges of assessing consequences and fairness.
Most importantly, we've highlighted that validity isn't just a technical matter, it's a human one.
It is.
It's about using our best judgment and values to ensure that tests are tools for good, not instruments of harm or injustice.
Well said.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you've gained a deeper understanding of validity.
I hope so too.
And will continue to engage in the conversation about the role of testing in our lives.
Keep asking those tough questions.
Right.
Keep pushing for greater understanding.